At the edge of a vast, shadowy forest stands a humble cottage, home to young Hansel and Gretel, their father and their stepmother. The family's existence is defined by grinding poverty, a constant, oppressive force that shapes their daily lives and relationships. Their father, a woodcutter by trade, works tirelessly from dawn until dusk, the rhythmic sound of his axe echoing through the trees as he labors to provide for his family. Despite his unwavering dedication, his meager earnings barely sustain them, leaving everyone in a perpetual state of hunger and want. The cottage itself reflects their dire circumstances, dilapidated and worn, with thin walls that fail to keep out the cold forest winds. Inside, the sparse furnishings and bare cupboards tell the story of a family living on the edge of survival. For Hansel and Gretel, childhood innocence is overshadowed by the harsh realities of their impoverished existence. The family dynamic is further complicated by the stepmother, whose character stands in stark contrast to the father's gentle nature. Once accustomed to better circumstances, she views her current situation with bitter resentment. Her discontent manifests as thinly veiled contempt for her stepchildren, whom she perceives not as vulnerable young souls in need of care, but as additional burdens draining their already limited resources. Her sharp temper and cold demeanor create an atmosphere of tension and fear within the household. As their situation deteriorates and hunger becomes even more acute, the stepmother's desperation drives her to formulate a chilling plan. One frigid evening, as Hansel and Gretel lie huddled together in their small bed, their empty stomachs keeping sleep at bay, they overhear a conversation that will change their lives forever. Through the thin walls, the stepmother's voice cuts like ice as she proposes abandoning the children deep in the forest, reasoning that with fewer mouths to feed, she and the father might survive. "We cannot continue like this," she hisses, her words laced with cold determination. "There is not enough food for all of us. The children, they must go." The father's initial reaction is one of horror and refusal. His love for his children runs deep, and the thought of abandoning them to the dangers of the wild forest fills him with anguish. Yet the stepmother is relentless in her argument, painting a bleak picture of their collective future if they continue as they area slow, painful death by starvation. Her persistent pressure, combined with the undeniable reality of their desperate circumstances, gradually erodes his resistance. Torn between his paternal love and the crushing weight of their poverty, the father eventually succumbs to the stepmother's cruel plan. His heart fractures with grief as he agrees, believing perhaps that this terrible choice is the only way forward. Meanwhile, Hansel, wise beyond his years, absorbs every word of this devastating conversation. Understanding the grave danger that awaits them, he silently resolves to find a way to protect himself and his beloved sister. As Gretel trembles beside him, her small hand instinctively seeking his, a silent pact forms between the siblings. Whatever horrors lie ahead, they will face them together. As dawn breaks over the forest, the stepmother sets her cruel plan in motion with grim determination. She rouses Hansel and Gretel from their fitful sleep, her voice unnaturally cheerful as she announces a family excursion into the woods. The children, still haunted by the overheard conversation from the previous night, exchange knowing glances. This is no ordinary outing. Hansel, however, has already prepared for this moment. While the household still slumbered in the early morning darkness, he had slipped outside quietly, the cold dew dampening his small feet as he gathered smooth white pebbles from around their cottage. These stones, cool and reassuring in his pocket, represent his silent rebellion against the abandonment that awaits them. As the family ventures deeper into the forest, the familiar world gradually gives way to the unknown. Sunlight filters weakly through the dense canopy, casting dappled shadows on the moss-covered ground. The father walks ahead with slumped shoulders, the weight of his guilt visible in every step, his eyes deliberately avoiding his children's innocent faces. The stepmother leads with purposeful strides, her back straight and her resolve unwavering. Behind them, Hansel implements his clever strategy. With each careful step, his small hand dips into his pocket, retrieving a pebble that he discreetly drops onto the path. The white stones stand out against the dark forest floor, creating a subtle but visible trail breadcrumbs of hope in a journey of despair. Beside him, Gretel clutches his other hand tightly, her face pale with unspoken fear, yet drawing comfort from her brother's quiet confidence. Eventually, they reach a secluded clearing bathed in a rare patch of sunlight. Here, the parents build a small fire and instruct the children to rest, promising to return shortly after gathering more firewood. The false reassurance hangs heavy in the air as the adults disappear among the trees, leaving Hansel and Gretel alone with only the crackling flames for company. Hours pass with excruciating slowness. The fire dwindles to embers, then ashes. The forest, once alive with birdsong, grows eerily quiet as daylight fades. Shadows lengthen and merge, transforming familiar shapes into menacing silhouettes. The realization that their parents aren't returning finally breaks Gretel's composure. Tears stream down her face as she begins to sob, her small body shaking with fear and betrayal. Hansel kneels beside his sister, his own heart racing despite his outward calm. "Don't worry, Gretel," he whispers, his voice steady and reassuring. "I've left a trail. When the moon rises, we'll be able to find our way home." His words offer a lifeline of hope in their desperate situation. True to his promise, as darkness fully envelops the forest and the moon ascends to cast its silvery light through the branches, the pebbles Hansel dropped begin to gleam like tiny stars fallen to earth. The siblings follow the shimmering path hand in hand, their small silhouettes moving determinedly through the moonlit trees. Despite their fear, exhaustion, and hunger, they press forward, guided by Hansel's foresight and the gentle glow of the stones. When they finally emerge from the forest's edge and see the faint lamplight of their cottage in the distance, relief washes over them. Their father rushes out to meet them, his face a canvas of worry transformed into overwhelming joy as he embraces them tightly, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. The stepmother, however, watches from the doorway, her expression hardening into barely concealed fury at the sight of the children's return. Though Hansel and Gretel are safely home for now, the calculating look in their stepmother's eyes tells them that their ordeal is far from over. Her dark resolve has merely been temporarily thwarted, not extinguished. In the aftermath of the children's unexpected return, a cold fury simmers within the stepmother. Her failed plan only intensifies her resentment toward Hansel and Gretel, whose presence she views as the insurmountable obstacle to her own survival. With renewed determination, she confronts the father once more, her voice lowered but sharp with urgency as she insists on a second attempt. "This cannot continue," she presses, her eyes hard and unforgiving in the dim light of their cottage. "The children must go. This time, we will take them so deep into the forest that they will never find their way back. There will be no trails of pebbles to guide them." The father, still haunted by the guilt of his first betrayal, initially resists. His conscience weighs heavily upon him, the memory of his children's innocent faces as they returned home etched painfully in his mind. Yet the stepmother's relentless arguments, combined with the harsh reality of their dwindling resources, gradually erode his already weakened resolve. Each day brings new evidence of their desperate situation: empty cupboards, hollow cheeks, and the constant gnawing presence of hunger. Finally, with a deep, agonizing sigh that seems to emerge from the very depths of his fractured soul, he acquiesces to her cruel plan once more. Hansel, ever vigilant, overhears their hushed conversation through the thin walls of their home. A familiar fear grips his heart, but it is quickly overshadowed by determination. Having outsmarted the adults once before, he resolves to do so again. That night, under the cover of darkness, he attempts to slip outside to gather more pebbles, his small feet moving silently across the worn wooden floor. But this time, he finds the door firmly locked, the key turned securely in its place. The stepmother, having learned from her previous failure, has anticipated his clever strategy and taken precautions to prevent its repetition. Morning arrives with a sense of foreboding. Once again, the family sets off into the forest, venturing even deeper than before. Hansel, though thwarted in his original plan, has devised an alternative. From his meager breakfast of dry bread, the last morsel of food in their home, he secretly breaks off tiny pieces. As they walk, he discreetly drops these crumbs behind them, creating what he hopes will be another path home. Gretel watches her brother with quiet admiration, drawing strength from his resourcefulness, even as fear threatens to overwhelm her. This time, their journey takes them far beyond familiar territory. The trees grow taller and more densely packed, their ancient trunks and intertwining branches forming a canopy so thick that little sunlight penetrates to the forest floor. Strange sounds echo around them, the distant call of unknown birds, the rustling of creatures in the underbrush, the creaking of branches in the wind. Everything about this part of the forest feels older, wilder, and more forbidding. Eventually, they reach another clearing, even more remote than the first. Once again, the parents build a small fire and instruct the children to wait, promising to return soon. The words ring hollow, their falseness evident in the father's averted gaze and the stepmother's thin smile. As the adults disappear among the trees, Hansel and Gretel sit in silence, the weight of abandonment settling over them like a heavy cloak. As the day wanes and shadows lengthen, Hansel finally rises, ready to lead his sister home along the trail of breadcrumbs. But to his horror, he discovers that his clever plan has failed. The forest birds, sharp-eyed and hungry, have found and devoured every single crumb, leaving no trace of the path he had so carefully created. Reality crashes down upon the siblings with devastating force. They are truly lost, with no way to find their way back to the world they know. As darkness descends upon the ancient forest, Hansel and Gretel cling to each other, their small faces pale with the realization that they must now face whatever dangers lie ahead with only each other for protection. For 3 days, Hansel and Gretel wander through the endless labyrinth of the forest. Their small bodies grow weaker with each passing hour, hunger gnawing at their empty stomachs, thirst parching their throats. The forest, once merely intimidating, now seems actively hostile. Branches reach out like gnarled fingers, roots rise to trip their tired feet, and shadows deepen into impenetrable darkness with each sunset. Despite their exhaustion, they push forward, Hansel's arm protectively around his sister's trembling shoulders as they navigate the wilderness that threatens to consume them. On the 3rd day, as the afternoon light filters weakly through the dense canopy, they stumble upon something so unexpected, so utterly out of place in this wild setting, that they momentarily believe hunger has driven them to hallucinate. Before them stands a house, but not an ordinary dwelling. This house appears to be constructed entirely of food. Walls of gingerbread, window panes of clear sugar, roof tiles of cake, and decorations of colorful candies that glisten in the dappled sunlight. "Hansel," Gretel whispers, her voice barely audible, "do you see what I see?" The children approach cautiously, disbelief gradually giving way to desperate hope. The sweet aroma wafting from the extraordinary structure overwhelms their senses, awakening their hunger with painful intensity. Unable to resist any longer, they rush forward. Hansel breaks off a piece of the sugar window, while Gretel begins to nibble at the gingerbread wall. the sweetness explodes on their tongues, momentarily erasing the memory of their abandonment and suffering. Their frantic feasting is interrupted by a soft, quavering voice. "Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is nibbling at my house?" Startled, the children freeze as the door of the confectionery dwelling swings open. An elderly woman emerges, her appearance as disarming as her gentle smile. She is bent with age, leaning heavily on a gnarled walking stick, her snow-white hair framing a face lined with countless wrinkles. Her eyes, however, hold a peculiar gleam that momentarily gives Hansel pause. "Poor children," she croons, her voice honeyed with sympathy. "How thin and hungry you look. Come inside, come inside. There's no need to eat my house when I have proper food waiting for you." Hesitation flickers briefly across Hansel's face, but the promise of real food and shelter proves too powerful to resist. The old woman ushers them into her cottage, where the interior presents a stark contrast to the whimsical exterior. Inside, everything is meticulously organized. Bundles of herbs hang from the ceiling, strange bottles line rough wooden shelves, and a large iron oven dominates one wall. The air is heavy with unfamiliar scents, some sweet, others sharp and medicinal. The children devour the feast she places before them: fresh bread, milk, pancakes drizzled with honey, nuts, and apples. Their suspicion melts away with each mouthful, replaced by drowsy contentment as they are shown to soft beds, the first comfort they've known in days. But as dawn breaks, the facade crumbles. Hansel awakens to find himself locked in a small cage, while Gretel is roughly shaken awake by hands that now resemble claws more than human fingers. The old woman's gentle demeanor has vanished entirely, her hunched back straightened, her voice transformed from soothing to harsh and commanding. "Fool children," she cackles, her eyes now clearly revealing their malevolent gleam. "I've been hunting for such tender morsels for so long. The boy I shall fatten up before I feast, and you, girl, shall be my servant until then." The horrifying truth dawns on them with sickening clarity. They have not found salvation, but walked willingly into the trap of a witch who hungers for children's flesh. The gingerbread house, so enchanting and welcoming, was merely bait in her sinister hunt. As Gretel is forced to prepare food intended to fatten her brother for slaughter, their desperate situation seems more hopeless than ever before. Days melt into weeks as the witch's sinister plan unfolds. Each morning, she approaches Hansel's cage and demands he extend a finger through the bars so she can assess his progress. Clever Hansel, understanding her poor eyesight, offers instead a small chicken bone he salvaged from his meals. The witch, running her bony fingers along its slender length, grows increasingly frustrated by his apparent failure to gain weight despite the rich food she forces upon him. Meanwhile, Gretel endures her own torment. Reduced to a servant, she spends her days hauling water, chopping wood, and preparing the very meals intended to fatten her brother for slaughter. Her once bright eyes grow dull with exhaustion, her small hands raw and blistered from endless labor. Yet beneath her apparent submission, a quiet resilience takes root. She watches the witch carefully, learning her routines, noting her weaknesses, and waiting for any opportunity that might present itself. That opportunity arrives on a crisp morning when the witch's patience finally shatters. "Enough," she screeches, her voice grating like metal on stone. "Fat or thin, today I shall feast." She orders Gretel to light the massive oven, to make it hotter than it has ever been before. "When the flames are high enough to roast a pig, we will see how tender your brother's flesh becomes," she cackles, her eyes gleaming with malevolent anticipation. Gretel obeys, stoking the fire until waves of heat distort the air around the oven's iron mouth. The witch, practically salivating at the thought of her imminent feast, approaches to inspect the flames. Here, Gretel sees her chance, the moment she has been silently preparing for through all her days of captivity. "I don't think it's hot enough yet," she says innocently, her voice carefully modulated to hide the thundering of her heart. "I can't tell if it's ready," the witch snorts with derision. "Foolish child, move aside." She pushes forward to peer into the oven's depths. In that crucial moment, Gretel summons all her strength born of fear, of love for her brother, of desperate determination to survive. With one powerful shove, she pushes the witch into the roaring inferno and slams the heavy iron door shut. The witch's howl of rage transforms instantly into a scream of agony that echoes briefly before being swallowed by the crackling flames. Hands trembling but resolve unwavering, Gretel rushes to free her brother. She finds the key hanging from a nail near the cage and releases Hansel, who bursts from his confinement to embrace her fiercely. For a moment, they cling to each other, their shared ordeal binding them together more powerfully than even their blood ties. But their escape is not yet complete. As they prepare to flee the gingerbread house forever, Gretel notices something glittering in the corner, the witch's hidden treasure. Jewels and gold coins spill from an old chest, the ill-gotten gains of countless previous victims. "We should take it," Gretel decides, her voice stronger than it has been in weeks. "It belongs to the children who came before us." They fill their pockets with precious stones and gold pieces, not from greed, but with the understanding that this wealth might transform their family's desperate circumstances. The very poverty that had driven their father to such a terrible choice. With newfound confidence, they set out to find their way home. This time, fortune smiles upon them. A white duck helps them cross a wide river, and familiar landmarks gradually appear as they approach the edge of the forest. When they finally reach their cottage, they find their father alone, their stepmother having died during their absence. He rushes to embrace them, tears streaming down his hollow cheeks, his body bent with the weight of grief and remorse. As Hansel and Gretel empty their pockets, revealing the witch's treasure that will forever end their poverty, they offer something even more valuable than gold: forgiveness. In this moment of reunion and redemption, the broken family begins to heal, strengthened by the terrible journey that transformed two frightened children into survivors who conquered darkness with courage, wit, and unwavering love for each other.